Sunday at 1714 East 7th Avenue in Ybor City, where it all began. And here we are at the normal time with our normal show from Suncoast Normal. It's the rotation. Let's jump in. That is so inspiring.
It's so good, that theme music. That's like what, the third time we've heard it today?
Yeah, absolutely. And it just keeps getting better every single time. Now let's introduce who we have here. First off, I'll go first because I'm here. Uh, my name is Gary Stein. I'm the political director for Suncoast Normal here in Central Florida, South Central Western Florida. To my right, your left, well, yeah, is Carlos Jose Angel Ermida, our deputy director, our master of business administration, and our all-around good guy when he's sober and high, actually.
Oh, hi, Gary. I'm just getting some reading in here.
Yeah, you're always researching. What is that book?
This is The Emperor Wears No Clothes. The mic's a little far away from my face, but this is The Emperor Wears No Clothes. This is a very, very important book when it comes to cannabis legalization.
You're popping in and out.
Uh-oh.
Now you got to work on your phone. And
what's happening?
Well, while you're figuring that one out, up in our upper right-hand corner here, we have our executive director coming to us from above the Beltway, where he hits them below the Beltway in Washington, D.C., Chris Cano. I got the name right this time.
Indeed. Well, happy Sunday, everyone. And, I just got to say, Carlos, that book that you're reading there is one of the reasons why I have my master's degree in public administration.
Oh, really? You study this book here, Cano?
So I wrote my master's thesis on cannabis prohibition policy, and if it wasn't for the amazing research that I found in The Emperor Wears No Clothes and the other sources it was able to connect me to, I probably wouldn't be sitting before you today.
And it's written by a guy who they named a strain after, I understand. Jack Hare, who it was the official hemperer, and pretty much the father of our movement and the father of our special guest here in the secret square below us here, Dan Hare. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Well, how about that? See, I can do that. Coming to us from the wild, wild west of California, where he's been in it to win it for a very, very long time. Dan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You have a little bit of a cold here. I know the perfect medicine for that, but you can go ahead and do it after the show.
He's talking about marijuana.
He is.
No way.
Now, we are going to talk a bit about your father for a while, but of course, he is so much the center of our universe. But I am going to get to questions about you and what you're doing right now as well. But what do you remember about your dad's evolution into the industry?
Well, my dad's evolution really didn't, it really wasn't part of the industry. The industry didn't exist and still is trying to find itself. It's becoming an industry, but, from the 1970s to, even the 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't what we experience today. It was a life of activism, not advocation. And it was following the truth of cannabis and its possibilities if we were to be able to become an industry, if we were able to break away from the constraints of prohibition, if we were able to have an understanding of what this plant could be if we let it. And that was really, how I grew up is being an activist, being an educator, first from my father to me and my brothers and sisters and everybody around us, then through my father's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and then seeing how that ignited other people to find their voices and then to stand up and find their truth about cannabis and be able to perpetuate what is still ongoing today, which is the fight to end prohibition and the right to be able to participate in this burgeoning economic, development called the cannabis industry.
Well, I'm the OG here, and I was one of the guys who was getting it from his roommate in college back in 1970, and and we were just using it as a recreational kind of situation until that point that I decided to go ahead and go to the Hash Bash one year, and Jackson Clare was there, and everything was just an amazing bit of activism as well as cannabis. And I suddenly realized, wow, there's actually a movement afoot to actually legalize this thing that we're doing in the dark, so to speak. And I had hoped it would have gone faster, but of course, during that time, I actually got paraquadded at the Hash Bash, and so I had to actually quit for a couple of years. But it is so great to see how much we've gone far from uh, legacy industry. Well, I guess we can't say illicit or we can't say black market anymore. But
Well, you could still say that because it still exists because prohibition still exists.
oh, exactly. And in fact, the black market is actually 15 times the size of the legal market right now, and that is just a fact. And we had hoped we would have segued by now, but of course, we're still fighting.
Yeah, we've been fighting for a long time, and of course your dad changed the way we fight. You're talking to three guys from Normal at one point, and regretfully, there was a point where Normal kind of turned their back on your dad, right?
Uh,
And
yes.
but now it's all different. Anybody in Normal, right? They talk about your father, and it's nothing but the utmost esteem, right? It changed the way Normal operates. The way Normal used to operate was this is a victimless crime. People in jail for marijuana. It's a bullshit crime. Now there's all this information here that everybody has. And I'm sorry if you're saying any information about how marijuana is medicinal or how hemp is helpful or anything like that. It came from this book. It came from this book. Like that's the reason why we all know it. You know, um, can you comment about how the struggle because at one point your father was against the entire movement. And that's really the way it looks like to me, from where I'm sitting. Can you kind of comment on the struggle your father went through to kind of change everybody's opinion when it comes to to marijuana, even people for marijuana?
Well,
Can
I
you?
can tell you, that my father had no struggle with marijuana because he didn't understand it. He didn't know anything about it other than the government and everybody that had educated him as a youth said that it was the most dangerous thing ever. So there was no struggle for him. Um, the struggle for the struggle in his understanding changed when in the late 60s he came across my mother smoking marijuana with her girlfriends after working at the house where she was raising his three kids, and he walked into the home and found her smoking cannabis, and he lost his mind. Thought that he was literally going to have to turn her to the police, which today would be like Child Protective Services, and turn her in and have her arrested. I mean, and this was the mother of his kids. So that's when it became a struggle for him and his understanding of what he should do. Because prior to that, anybody who was a counterculturist, a hippie, or somebody who smoked pot, to my father should have been taken out and summarily shot. And that's just his view.
Mhm,
That was just his view.
mhm.
And then he got high, and
Okay.
he was encouraged not to turn my mother in by a young law student that was living in his apartment building.
Uh-huh.
And he confided in her that he was going to do this, and she called him a fucking idiot. And
In a nice way, of course. Yeah.
it's, and so um, she convinced him not to do anything rash. And for some reason, her insulting him by calling him an idiot, um, endeared her to him, and he wanted to date her afterwards because I guess men like to be abused on some cases, in some cases. And so he spent the next few months trying to win her affections, and she said, "Hey, I can't hang out with you. You're too square." And finally, she said, "If you're gonna hang out with me, you're gonna have to get high." And he wanted to date her, so the woman's lure, brought him into this new world, and she got him high on some Acapulco Gold back in the late '60s,
Primo.
and that literally uh, overnight changed his reality. And instead of him going crazy and murdering people and all of that, he experienced the best food, the best music, the best intimacy that he had ever had in his life, um, says him. And, that literally started him on a quest of understanding of why he was so misinformed. Why was his experience so diametrically opposed to everything that he had learned? Why was the things that he had seemed to have felt and touched and experienced that night so intense and so amazing? And then why was this plant illegal? And that started him on a quest for information, and that information led to a decade of more of really intense research, talking and reaching out to the community and being reached out to by the community, um, and that really led to the book "The Emperor Wears No Clothes" in 1985, and it wasn't ever really a struggle for him, because once he had an experience that was so amazing, he realized that he needed to re-educate himself, and that really helped him to start re-educating, or actually educating, everybody else.
And we really had no idea that it was even possible to evolve as a nation where the prohibition no longer existed. We didn't think it was possible to get beyond the intimacy of the home to being something out that you could go out there like in the hash bash and just be with a bunch of friends in the field and jump into a whole bunch of rotations. But I know this is not a political question, but I have to ask because it's one of those kind of things you wonder about. When you first experienced cannabis, what was your father's opinion of that experience?
Well, he didn't
Was he in
know
favor?
he didn't know when I first experienced cannabis, because I, like every other kid, didn't want to share that with my parents.
Yeah.
But it wasn't long after that um, then me asking for cannabis was that came about. And he was never one to say, don't do it. So I can't say that it was a bad thing. There was
I'm
never a negative.
I'm actually dying to ask. So, like, I'm assuming you smoked weed with your father, right?
Yes.
What was he like when he was high?
Well, he was always high.
What?
So
All
what's it
right,
like
good
hanging
point.
out?
So
What's it like hanging out with
Good
Dad on a
point.
Tuesday?
I mean, it would be really, really difficult if you asked me, so was your dad, what was your dad like before he got high? And honestly, I remember, my father being, very, very stern, and, very, I don't want to say militant, but, very structured, and very intense. But he took some of that and moved it over to post getting high, and he was still very intense. Um, but it was I don't want to say a softer, because although he was sort of like a gentle teddy bear to some that knew him and got to experience sitting down with him, um, he was so intense and so emphatic about ending prohibition, that was the only times that he was truly enraged. it wasn't because he was enraged because he was high. He was enraged because of the injustices. He was enraged because of incarceration. He was enraged because of ignorance. And um, him being high was just I would say it was a way of calming him down and keeping him in the moment that he needed to be in to really express his his feelings about how disastrous prohibition was and the war on drugs were,
Yeah.
and that he would spend, you know, every hour of every day of his life from the 1970s to the time that he passed away, um, fighting for the rights of those who believed in this plant and for those who didn't believe in this plant. Because just because somebody is anti-cannabis, anti-marijuana, um, doesn't mean that they would not benefit from its existence within this space. So even those that would want to suppress this plant and its access, he fought for them too, because eventually everything that cannabis touches will touch everybody on this planet. And if you look at today, it's beginning to become that. People are using hemp soaps and hemp shampoos and hemp clothing and hemp energies and hemp plastics and hemp hemp products for their homes. And so, even folks that have spent a lifetime fighting against cannabis are benefiting from it. And he knew that if we embrace this plant to its full utility, that every human would be its benefactor.
I mean, Dan, you talking about also, reminiscing and getting high with your dad. That's some of the best memories I have of, Christmas time, sitting with my dad and passing a joint between him, my grandmother, my cousins, and and that just to have that type of family experience together. I know that means a lot. Meant a lot to me, in my memories and such, my own dad. And one of the reasons that I got into this movement was because when my dad was diagnosed with dementia, they gave him 6 months to live, and my mom had just beat breast cancer. For her to get a clean bill of health, and then the next month, my dad, being told my dad's going to go away, was devastating. And at the time, I was in my master's program, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, what I wanted to research. I was just like, hey, I get a master's degree so I can get a good government job in the future with some benefits. And then to do my research and look for a cure for my dad, something that could stave it off, and stumbling across your dad's book and the research that it helped me dive into to find deeper. And when I finally read for myself on the U.S. patent website, there's a patent by the U.S. government to cure people with strokes and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia, utilizing cannabinoids as a treatment. It infuriated me. So when you say your dad was in that constant rage and cannabis was what calmed him down, I relate to that on so many levels because I still hold that bitterness and that rage consistently in my heart, and it's a fire that keeps me wanting to get up every day and keep fighting, and that's why there's been many times over the years where after my dad passed, I thought, hey, I'm gonna hang it up as director of this chapter. I'm gonna go do something else, and it's like, no, something else keeps pulling me in because it's that fire, it's that rage, and your dad helped light that in me. And I just want you to know that even though he may not be here with us, his spirit does live on through that fire that we have in our bellies.
Every day. Every day. No, I see and experience his energy continuously coming back to me and everything that I do and the things that I find myself surrounded in when I go to, MJ BizCon, or I go to a local festival that is, hemp based or cannabis based, whether it's a high times event or, a secret sesh or, any elevation of education and experience while using, this plant and its possibilities. I get to see, the effect that my father's energy put out there into the world comes back, and it comes back with the inspiration of folks that are creating companies today and creating jobs and dedicating themselves to this plant and its possibilities, and really investing in the future of cannabis, whether it's in clothing or new technologies and processing, you know, whether it's hemp plywoods or insulations or clothing or further understanding of its medical attributes, even though we can't really talk about it because we don't we don't have a true scientific study going on in this country. But we know that in other countries there's been huge scientific studies going on for 50, 60 years now, and that we're not able to publish those here in the United States, but they're being published elsewhere. And I get to see that energy come back through all of these folks that have read this book and have been inspired by it, through shows like what you're doing now. These everything that I experience today in some way has to do with the ring of energy that continues to circle back around, like waves on a shore, and I get to experience that. At least that's the way I interpret it. Is that I get like I've never met you, Chris, but your story of how my father impacted you and helped you go through your master's program is another ring of energy that gets to come back to me through these stories and these experiences, and that your energy is connected to me and it's connected to my father. So there's seldom a day that goes by where I don't feel my father's energy surrounding me, and I feel
yeah. And your dad suffered
amazing.
a pretty powerful stroke. I believe it was like 10 years before he passed, and it
Yeah.
didn't seem to slow him down. I know it kind of affected his left hand a bit, but
I can tell you that it did slow him down. He spent many years after that stroke doing anything and everything that he could to find a way to speak again, to find a way to read, to find a way to walk. It was, he went from being one of the most powerful voices in the space to, for a couple of years, really having no voice and nothing but frustration. And, even reading a newspaper, he couldn't process what he was reading. He would just end up, the one thing that he could always say was, fuck. And he would be reading a newspaper and just shake it and crumble it and just scream out the words. And it was just because he couldn't process what it was that he was reading. It was harder for him to make sense for a while. And it took a couple, 4 or 5 years before he really was able to formulate sentences again and really start to be able to communicate through the devastation of the stroke.
Wow. Yeah. My dad lost the ability to speak after a really bad stroke in 2014. And I'll never forget the first time I was able to get him some high quality RSO, and he started to talk again after not speaking for years. It had been almost 2 years since he had said a word. And just to hear him make words, not even make a coherent sentence, but just say words, brought tears to my mother and my face. And knowing that the plant has that much power and that the forces that be, the powers that be, suppress it. And your dad was someone who was revolutionary in bringing us that knowledge because in the grand scheme of all this, it's the suppression of that knowledge. And in this firsthand, like you said, we can't medically research it in this country, but I can say anecdotally that I saw my dad talk for the first time after a major stroke after a year and a half with one dose. And my dad passed away in 2017. We fought for the medical marijuana. Yeah, I mean, to be diagnosed in 2010 and told you got 6 months, and my mom, as a nurse, took stellar care of him, and and the sacrifices we had to make to. Now I remember having to repeat a class in my master's program because I got docked on my final grade 2 points because I chose to change his diaper before I came to my final exam, and I came late to the exam. And just I would make all those choices again, and even more so, I wish I had the knowledge I had in 2010 that I gained meeting up with Carlos and during the course of my master's research, studying your dad's material, and just having access was the biggest issue. It's like, now that you know what can treat someone, how do you find it? And how do you not get into trouble and you get arrested for it? Because that's what happened to me. I got arrested, and it changed my life. That's what led us to found this chapter of Suncoast Normal.
We're losing now some of the greats of the folks who've been working so hard. We just lost Eddie Lepp this last year, which was tragic. But I see that the mantle is being passed, so to speak. I mean,
Oh, Gary, you got a freeze there. So sometimes at the shop,
and several other folks,
there we go,
continuing to move this thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Where did I leave off?
Well, you kind
of you were saying that we're losing some of the legacy folks within the space, but the torch is being passed. There are lots of folks that are becoming the new voice, and I see that too, and it does come with some great hope for me, and also concern is that there's so much. There's so many new things that are happening within the space, and so many new people that are coming into the space that have come in because of, mostly at this point, most everybody who's new that I've been meeting is because of the economic opportunities that cannabis brings. And that doesn't necessarily translate to understanding where we've come from or the history of it, only the exploitation of what its possibilities are. And so a lot of these folks don't know really what prohibition is, because it doesn't affect them other than from a taxation level at this point. They don't understand that the plant that they go in and have purchased flower in a store that 40 years ago, that didn't happen. The only doors that opened back then were cell doors. And they don't really understand that this still exists even today. That the ghosts and the demons of prohibition are here. They are touching us in different ways today, and that there are so many people that are becoming part of this space, this community. And many of them are still not educated to why it exists, only that it exists. And I think that needs to change, because if we don't understand that this plant is not just here to create economic, well-being for a person or a corporation, that this plant is here for us to use for us, whether it's to lower stress. People, right now states are going, oh, is it medical? Is it recreational? Well, all cannabis is medicinal. So what's the difference? The difference is the narrative that states use in order to either tax it or tax it less, and so, the narratives that we're dealing with today are because of the new people that are coming into the space and becoming part of it and creating companies from it, are not educated enough to know that it still needs an advocate, not just somebody who's turning it into a product. We need advocates to fight for its freedom, because it is still not free. We have paid access in this country, but we don't have legalization in this country. We still have pathways to prison. We still have incarcerations. We still have, going to jail for having a home grow. I mean, when you look at the end of prohibition of alcohol, alcohol just became legal to produce. If I wanted to, create a winery in my garage, I could create 100 barrels of wine in my garage, or kegs of beer, or kegs of whiskey. I can do it unabated. I can literally produce as much as I want as a home brewer. But with cannabis, it's like, oh, you can do 4 plants or 6 plants or no plants. And if you live in a state that has access, some of the people that are within the space are saying, hey, we have access to cannabis now, so there's no reason, and there's no legal access for you to grow it at home, or at least they've tried to put those things in different language. Is that prohibition is still alive and well, and you know this new understanding from so many people who are uneducated are really perpetuating the ignorance of what prohibition was, because they're not doing anything to fucking change it.
One of my favorite activists, late activists, it was a friend of your father's, Dennis Perone.
Yep.
And started the first dispensary in the United States, the
Yeah.
Cannabis Buyers Club. I just have to ask that, that whole setting of the Cannabis Buyers Club out in San Francisco, and the setting of the cannabis industry as it is today, there's got to be a lot that is not there anymore that you kind of wish would still be around. I just kind of want you to kind of go into that setting and kind of tell me what was better.
Well, I would say that Prop 215 was. I would say that it was a magical time because it doesn't necessarily exist anymore. It was for a while the unicorn of cannabis, because it it allowed us to think with our hearts and our minds, and push away any kind of fear. Just the acceptance of Prop 215, the Compassionate Care Act. It, the people that voted for it, even if they didn't believe in cannabis, they knew that there was something that was helping their loved ones, whether it was somebody suffering from Alzheimer's or cancer or AIDS. They knew that there was a benefit there that they couldn't explain, and even against their own belief, thought that if if this could help somebody, then it should be available. And Proposition 215 passed, and it allowed people to think and feel with their hearts, and not fear. They didn't fear prohibition. They didn't fear what would happen to the community. All they knew was that this plant could possibly help the person, or somebody that they knew, or their parents or their son or their daughter or their mother, and they were able to think with their hearts and feel with their hearts. And that was the magic of Prop 215 and Dennis Perone. And my dad, even at the time, he was trying to legalize, as he always did, for full use of marijuana. And him and Dennis had competing initiatives in 1996. And Dennis was like, Jack, we're splitting the votes, and we're not going to get enough. We're not going to get enough signatures if we're both competing against one another to have two different narratives for what's possible right now. And Dennis convinced my dad to put down his California marijuana initiative, and join him to help pass Prop 215. And my dad jumped in, put down the California Cannabis and Hemp Initiative, and jumped on with the Compassionate Care Act. And even my dad, as tough as he was and as unwavering in his views on all cannabis should be legal, and that everybody who's been arrested for cannabis should be let out of jail, he realized that there was a great need for compassion and love, and the belief in this plant could help, and set his own beliefs aside for a moment and helped to pass 215 with Dennis. And for the years following that, there was a time where stores felt and worked and operated compassionately. That's, these co-ops that existed, they truly existed for the patients for a while, and then, as money does, it changes narratives, it changes perspectives. It changed the perspective with the state when they realized that there was so much compassionate cannabis being grown and potentially sold, that they weren't being that wasn't being taxed, that they had to figure a way to end Prop 215, and that's what started all of these cockamamie other initiatives to create um, recreational, and that's when you started hearing the difference between medicinal cannabis. Oh, do you use it for medicine? or do you use it for recreation? And going back to my first statement is that all cannabis use is medicinal. If you're stressed out at your job, if you're crazed with what the last 2 years of being confined in your home or restricted in travel because of COVID, the stresses that's put on families and personalities and businesses, and the way that you feel internally. If cannabis is helping it, then it's medicinal. And if all cannabis is medicinal, then why are we being taxed? Why are we being extorted from from the states, the cities, the counties that these plants are being grown in? And so the real difference between the Cannabis Buyers Club and today is, in most cases, and I'm not saying all, because I know a lot of store owners that are committed to this plant, but because corporations have come into the space, it is becoming in some cases as corrupt as anything that prohibition was behind.
Yeah, Dale, in our last segment, on a previous episode, I was reviewing, this stuff that you get in the legal states from these multi-state operators versus what you get here in the DC area from the legacy market guys in this gray market. And this is, 16% THC. When you smoke it, it has some type of flavor to it that just doesn't really sit right. And it's $54 plus tax. So you spend over $60 for this. And this is from New Jersey. And then this from DC tastes good. It hits you better. It tastes cleaner. And it costs $25. And there's no taxes.
Yeah, and it doesn't taste like the campfire.
Today it costs $25.
Yeah.
And today it's still from a legacy market.
Yeah.
But all of these things unfortunately are changing, and I'd like to think that I would hope that government will make it better. But the one thing about government is it truly never really makes anything better. And
do you see Gavin Newsom doing more for it than Jerry Brown did in California?
I don't believe in anything that Gavin Newsom says or does with regards to virtually anything, especially that in cannabis. I think, excuse me, I'm so sorry. We had here in California the best opportunity to do it right. We had the shining example of what Prop 215 was, what it represented, how it reached the people, how it didn't threaten communities. But then everything changed, and they started creating this new narrative of fear and where a dispensary or a compassionate access place could open up. And the state of California says, oh, we're going to create all these laws so that organized crime cannot be involved in cannabis, and that they would track the flower, they would track the money, they would track how it was grown, where it was grown, how it was transported. And all that really did was turn the state of California and all its municipalities into the same drug kingpins that they had been fighting against. They were talking about getting rid of the mob, but our state and local municipalities became the mob. They became those that said, look, you're going to grow this cannabis. You're going to pay this much tax just to grow it, this much tax to transport it, this much tax to process it, this much tax to sell it. And we're going to track it all. And then once it's done, you're going to give us all of your money because we're going to tax every bit of it from you. And then you're going to get back out there on the street corner, sell that flower, and bring me my money, bitch.
Damn.
And that's the state of California and every other state that is in this space that is allowing cannabis access. Play by their rules, just like the mob. Grow where they say, create green zones like, hey, you can only grow here. You can only grow here, you know? And really constrain everything that this plant is and how we operate and push legacy people that have hearts out of the business so it could be replaced with people that have no freaking hearts. You know, your bigger corporations, I'll leave their names off of this.
We don't mind.
We don't care.
Oh yeah, you might not have missed our last episode. We slammed the largest multi-state operator in the country. We just had to call it out because here in Florida, you mentioned organized crime, and it turns out that the largest multi-state operator in the country, husband went to jail here in Florida for bribing a Tallahassee city councilman so they could pass, so they could pass moratoriums to ban dispensaries to allow competition basically because they were already grandfathered in around the moratoriums and such, and they didn't know anything about growing cannabis, but they bought the politicians they needed to buy.
But they had 30 years of nursery work.
Yeah, exactly. But no cannabis work.
Exactly.
And now you pay $70 for an eighth of mid-level stuff that may have mold, may have pesticide. That from the leaked photos we get from their grow houses have pest in them, and they just have no clue of what they're growing. It's sunshine booth for lack of a better word.
No, that's a good word actually. And don't forget, we also created Adam Bierman over here. He came from here. So we apologize for that, even though we didn't have any say in what he was doing. But he did a lot of damage to the industry to show just how bad things could be run.
Well, we'll get Gary on the other side. Politicians use the excuse, "What about the kids?" And the Journal of Adolescent Health just put out a study where they had a cohort of over 12,500 young adults from 18 to 25, where they looked at their use of alcohol, nicotine, non-prescribed pain pills in Washington State following the adult use of cannabis. And their consumption of alcohol, cigarettes, and legal pills fell following the legalization of marijuana in that state. So, the argument that we need to overregulate this to save the kids is absolutely bullshit. And politicians need to stop using it, like you said, Dan.
Well, you just answered, in a sense, your own question without, if you're subverting the dollars from prescription pills, from alcohol and cigarettes, then you've got three of the top lobbyists against why cannabis should be even further restricted.
Yeah.
And we've got congresswomen like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's heavily involved in the alcohol industry, and for some odd reason never seems to vote for things that we need in regards to this industry. Go figure. It's all about the dollars. But California, it seems like it's a microcosm of the federal laws, because you have a huge patchwork of all the different county laws and municipality laws that cause all sorts of chaos in California. And yet still, I think California is still way ahead of Florida. Of course, it doesn't help that we have DeSantis, who has not really helped our industry whatsoever and a lot of other issues. But
he's helped himself to those campaign donations from the existing industry. It's just the when you say industry, Gary, you're talking about the mom and pop folks like Carlos and other small business owners who want to move from being, hemp retailers to being medical marijuana retailers. But because of vertical integration, that's just not a possibility.
Now, I was over in Vegas a couple of years ago and had to go to the Jack Hare Cup because, it was a cool thing to do. And one of our members here actually won one of the awards for the best CBD chocolate. I posted that picture for you. I don't know if you still have it or not.
Oh.
He's sitting there with it with his big ass glass chalice, and he was so thrilled. But it was interesting to see all the different strains and all the different nurseries that we don't even get a chance to hear about here in Florida. That show that there's so much out there that's better. That if they could ever get to us somehow, would make the industry a better place. We don't have to be like we were in the 80s, where what you got was basically what they had to sell, and usually it was brown brickweed. I went through some of my old double albums the other day, and I found brown crumbs in the center of all of them, and I knew exactly what that stuff was. I didn't dare smoke it though.
Oh, Gary, that's the best stuff to smoke. I remember one time going on vacation to Jamaica, and we had a blunt of some purple kush I got in Jamaica that got stuck in my bathroom bag, and I found it like 6 months later, and I smoked it with my grandmother. Unfortunately, she wanted to go to the emergency room after having a panic attack after that. But it was some strong shit, man.
But with things like the Jack Hare Cup and stuff, you're continuing to forward the knowledge and situations in regards to cannabis across the country. What else is the Jack Hare Foundation now doing? What else are you doing right now?
Well, the Jack Hare Foundation always continues to educate as much as we can. We've spent the last 7 or 8 years. We've been invited to other countries to speak. I've been able to spend some time in Thailand just prior to its becoming more cannabis accepting. I've been to Spain, England, to Nepal, South America, Mexico, with regards to just educating folks on the possibilities and really, in some cases, even trying to help reintroduce their own culture back to the culture in which I'm visiting, because cannabis has been part of, so many countries' legacies and stories for, thousands of years, but still haven't re-embraced cannabis since the Single Convention Act, 1961, where virtually every country in the world made cannabis illegal with the signing of with the signature on a piece of paper. And so the foundation continues to educate in any way and every way that we can. This year we're doing a fundraiser down in Laguna Beach. We're going to do a Jack Hare Foundation golf tournament. We're raising money for a brick and mortar museum. This museum will hopefully be located in downtown Los Angeles in the Green Street building. There's approximately 4,500 square feet available for development for this museum. We just need to raise about $500,000 to build it out, and then another, $350,000 a year in order to run it, because the space is expensive. But hopefully it'll be the first true cannabis and hemp museum here in the United States that will be permanent and really reflect not just cannabis and its attributes here in the development of this country, but what's really going on in the space, what prohibition was, how we've started to exit from it, I hope, what the possibilities are in the future, where we are medicinally speaking, where we are medically speaking, where we are scientifically speaking, and really have a very diverse presentation of all things cannabis, from the Egyptian god Sheshat, who was depicted in the pyramids, be sometime between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago, with a depiction of the cannabis leaf above her head as she's doing mathematics and accounting. There's so much to learn about the history of cannabis that doesn't include incarceration. That people need to know that this wasn't a plant that was feared. This was a plant that was revered. That international commerce and circumnavigating the globe was powered by cannabis. It wasn't powered by diesel. That great economies that were able to be delivered from one continent to another didn't happen by steamship. Initially, it happened by sailors and ships that only transported these goods because of cannabis. And
I believe the
that
story about the War of 1812 in the book to emphasize that to a lot of people that this was actually a war over hemp more than anything else.
Yeah.
as many wars are, they're fought over a woman.
Well, Dan,
Whether it's the female or male hemp plant, or
well, Dan, you pointed out the Egyptian goddess Shashat, and in her role as the goddess who measures, they depict her with the cannabis hemp leaf in her headdress. I just think that's actually kind of ironic. The goddess who measures, and so basically the ancient Egyptians would put it in stone. Don't cheat your weed dealer. There's a goddess watching you.
Yeah, know
The
your
goddess.
plug. Know your plug.
3.5 is 3.5. Regardless of the BC or AD.
yeah, but but the fact that even our founding fathers today, as we look back, and you're there in Washington D.C., there's a monument there to Thomas Jefferson. There's there. I mean, when
Yeah,
whether
I
it's
was just there
whether
last
it's
weekend.
yeah, well, whether it's Washington or Jefferson, you know, these people today would potentially be put in prison for life.
Yeah,
Thomas Jefferson was smuggling cannabis from Europe into the United States to help give us our independence from the source of goods that we were transporting from England. And for us to not have an understanding that this plant was so important, that our founding fathers risked their lives and their freedoms in order to smuggle it into this new land before before it was a country. um, it's extraordinary that the importance of this plant became so much so that it was mandated to grow. It was something that you could pay your taxes with. It was something that was considered legal tender. It made our rope. It made
yeah,
our paints. It made our glues. It made our in some cases even gunpowder. But it was the lamp oil for our street lamps. It was the grease for the wagon's wheels that came west that was covered in cannabis. You know, these were things that were important to the development of this country, and our founding fathers were responsible for it. Today, they would be incarcerated for it.
yeah,
And it is just, when you talk about learning about history or eliminating history, or having it just not even exist, it's extraordinary the things that are happening in and around this country, through the narrative of the loudest bullhorns that are out there. And these are things that we need to continue to change. And that only is changed by voices like yours and shows like this, and not just the continuation of creating commerce with cannabis, but being able to create common sense with the understanding of cannabis. And there's so much to do. And from the foundation standpoint, we look to educate and re-educate, and make it available, through sites like Amazon. You can go to Amazon and go to the 14th edition of The Emperor Wears No Clothes. You can order it for digital download that's interactive, so you can literally, on your iPhone, or your desktop, or your iPad, or whatever device you have, you can download a copy of The Emperor for $9.99, and literally not just read about history, but click on the hyperlinks within it and actually go to documentaries, testimonials, and it really expands what the Emperor is. And as you're reading about 1942's Hemp for Victory, the United States Department of Agriculture film that was made for the United States Department of Defense, as you're reading about that history and the emperor, you can click on the hyperlink in the digital version, and it'll take you to that 14-minute video of Hemp for Victory, and you can see the United States government almost for the first time tell the complete truth without using fear. But of course, they had to use some level of fear in this thing that they've already started to create the narrative. But for 14 minutes, they say how important this plant was, and then they say, oh, well, wait a minute, the seeds are dangerous. Yeah, it's really quite absurd. But what they do recognize is that for more than 5,000 years, this plant was made for everything, and it was responsible for the health, wealth, and security of countries, which is why we needed to grow it for the war. In order to create a free world, we needed to grow cannabis, and this was the most patriotic thing that you could do. So go grow cannabis. And then as soon as the war was over, it was like, oh no, we don't even recognize that we even made this film, or that it was even a propaganda film, or and then to go so far as to call my father a fraud for finding a copy of it and mass producing it on VHS tapes and showing the absurd positions of this government and how far they would go to cover up their own good deeds and for sure all of their misdeeds.
I do have the DVD of the book. It's a lot of fun to watch, and of course, a lot of folks who have passed away are now on that DVD. Is it still out there in print somewhere?
I'm
or
sorry.
Streamed? The DVD of the book for Emperor Wears No Clothes. Sorry, we had to cut down on our mics over here because we have a car show out here that continues to blare music no matter how many times we beat them down.
Well, the actual book is available through Amazon. The DVD, I'm not producing it currently, but we are looking to reproduce the book on DVD. But so many people don't even have DVD players anymore because everything streams. But it's certainly a great asset for doing presentations.
Hey, Dan, is the book available in audiobook by chance?
No, I've toyed around with it a little bit.
You should ask Malcolm to narrate it. He said he's got that voice. That'd be pretty cool. I'd download that off of Amazon if he was narrating it.
I would be. It would be great to figure out a way to tell that story, but I think to do a book narration, I would almost think that it would take multiple talents in order to do it, because the structure of the book is not necessarily a single story. It bounces around as bits and pieces of history and facts. Yeah. And I think it could be more powerful if different voices, different energies represented different parts of the book. I'm not saying that I'm right, but it's sort of what has come up in my own thought process on what it would take to create an audio version of it.
Oh no, I think that's the right thinking. I got an audio Bible myself, and it has Morgan Freeman and Samuel Jackson, and it has Louis Gossett Jr. So yeah, I think you can really create something great when you do have an amalgamation of different stories and different voices to tell it.
So it's just an undertaking I have not had the bandwidth to really deal with.
Understandable.
The space of cannabis, hemp, whatever you want to, call what it is that we're spending our time in and with today, is moving so fast that it's like this canna train never ever stops. Sometimes it'll slow down, but most of the time it's a high-speed rail train, and it is moving much faster than we can react to in many cases, and so many of the. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just this week, the U.S. Appeals Court upheld Delta 8 and other cannabis-derived consumer products hemp derived cannabis products. So we had some doctors on earlier this year to talk about the whole reason we have Delta 8, Delta 10, THCO, and all these new hemp derived cannabinoid products is because of prohibition. And because states aren't moving fast enough because of taxes and such. Carlos makes his money selling hemp products there in the store. I mean, and people need access for their pets too. I mean, people aren't going to wait around for their dog to stop having seizures for the politicians to pass it for pets. People go get their dog their hemp products and such. But to the point that there are so many great applications for the plant, and people don't know it. And your father's book and the work you all continue to do to spread that knowledge is amazing. And that's, it enlightens people in ways that, like we started at the beginning of the show, connects us all together. So we wanted to thank you for coming on. Are there any projects that your foundation has coming up that you want to highlight for folks?
Really just the building of this brick and mortar foundation museum, I think is something that will pay dividends with regards to changing narratives and understandings and bringing down these walls of fear and trepidation, and really help to expand and enlighten folks to embrace this plant and its possibilities for decades and generations to come. And I a lot of that has to do with just being able to have real information that's available that people can, like reading it is one thing and it can inspire you. Like this book inspires, people to look at cannabis differently. But when you're able to see and potentially touch the history behind cannabis, I think that is a very, very powerful tool in a way that the book is not going to be sufficient. And I think that allowing somebody to walk through a facility where they can literally see the people that they've been reading about in their school textbooks or college courses, and see how diverse these people were as the founding persons within this country or even globally. I think that will take the change and understanding of cannabis to yet another level. And at the same time, now that the Emperor's in digital format, we're going to be able to update the book in more real-time capacity. So at any time, as the book is available through Amazon, we'll be able, instead of changing my father's original story in the original pages, that we'll have addendums to the back of the book. Nice. That would be attributed to the stories in the beginning of the book. So that way I'm not rewriting chapters. I'm not trying to change the work that my father and so many did in order to produce the Emperor, but that we're able to have more of a living document that as we uncover information that we can verify, that we can attribute it to things that my father wasn't able to research when what the technologies that we have today weren't available in 1985 or 1990 or even in 2009, which was the last time that the book was officially updated and republished. But now we have the ability to put new information in without changing the original story, and I think that that's going to be something very powerful as we make our first update later this year.
As historians like myself and Carlos and Chris, we always believe that that the truth that is out there will be truth for forever, and we're glad that you're building on that knowledge, because it is so important for people to get out there and tell the story and let people continue to evolve until we get to the point where we do have, and I'm going to scratch the word recreational because I hate it, and just call it adult use or responsible adult use, because that is basically what we're looking at, because that is the way to access this without thinking it is just strictly for stoners, like him.
Yeah. No.
Well, look, if you all want to get more involved in the movement, if you want to learn more information, you can go to suncoastnormal.org, become a member of our chapter. As Suncoast Normal, we don't take paychecks to do this. And as much as I know Gary and Carlos and myself all wish we got paid to do this, we don't. We do this because the money goes back into the org, it goes back into our advocacy efforts. We continue to push to show that this is a plant that folks can, be responsible and sustainable capitalists in utilizing it, for commerce, but also that people should not be making money on this plant if there's people still in jail for trying to make money off of this plant. And so as a civil rights organization, our mission continues until all responsible cannabis users have safe access, which means one, safe, meaning that you don't have any repercussions in society, like going to jail, like losing your kids, like risking some type of health care or losing your job. And when we say accessible, meaning that it's affordable, meaning that, hopefully if your doctor says you need it, that your medical insurance will eventually pay for it. And we're working to create that world and create those paradigms and policies. And we this work that we have, again, is all because of our amazing guest today and his family and the work that they continue to pioneer. And so I just want to say thank you very much, Dan, for joining us on the show. And any parting words you want to leave the folks at home with?
Yeah, the truth is out, and cannabis is the future. Is really it.
That's powerful.
There you go. I guess we're